I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Sheila Signet's president and CEO, and we do kind of all the things academic. We do tutoring, test prep, executive function coaching, and college admissions. And of course, what we're here to talk about today is getting ready for the college process. If you've got your ear to the ground in your community, you're probably sensing all of the stress and tension in the air from those seniors who are rushing to complete their college applications, some of them maybe just starting and really feeling behind the eight ball. And I'm sure this is a topic that's been on your mind for a while if you have a teenager. But especially when you see these other people completely frazzled and freaking out, I'm sure you want to know, what can I do to avoid that next year or in 3 years? So I'm really glad that you've come here tonight. I'm going to keep my presentation quite short. I am going to give you kind of an overview of what goes into it, how I want you to think about approaching the process, a sense of the timeline, when to focus on what. And then I'm going to give you my best free tool on how to keep everything organized. And you can start organizing early in high school. You don't have to wait until we actually open the application in senior year. And that's, one of the biggest things you can do is sort of stay ahead of it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your child needs to be ahead of it. Just you need to have some awareness, and then you have to be intentional about when you bring them into awareness about what part of the process. So I'll help you kind of parse that today. And then, like I said, I want to leave just a ton of time for questions, because there are a lot of ducks, and it's hard to control a duck. I don't know if you've ever taken a duck on a walk, but your teenagers are not that different. It can be very hard to get them to focus on what you want them to focus on, what you think they need to focus on, when you think they need to focus on it. They may never naturally come around to focusing on it, or they may start to pick up that, this is something that their classmates are starting to think about, and maybe I should think about it too. And then they start to get themselves in a row. And that's great. But sometimes it doesn't happen at the pace you might want it to. So I think it's helpful for parents to have their own sense of the timeline, and you know your children best. You know when a good moment to bring something like this up is, how to bring it up with them, though that can still be challenging. And I want to give you a framework that you can adapt to your own family, right? So with that, I'm going to share my screen and take you through some frameworks and some information, and then we'll come back together to answer some questions. If you have questions at any point as we go along here, please feel free to put them in the chat. I am going to need to take a break for water every now and then, so I might take a question. Otherwise, we'll come back to it towards the end to come back to your question. All right, let me get everything set up here. There are too many windows. I know you guys all know this feeling. Too many windows, too many tabs. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up? Courtney, I can see your face. Can you let me know if you can see my screen? Was that a yes? Yes. Okay. Well, that's great, because I can't see my screen. Hold on one second. There it is. Okay. Now you should be able to see a title slide. Yes. Okay, great. I got a thumbs up. We did it. Okay, so today's presentation is really for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. If your child is younger than that, this is going to be great for you. You can sort of sit back and just take it in, maybe revisit this when they get a little closer to high school, but it will give you a sense of what you can look forward to. If you have a child who is a senior, some of this will still be applicable and relevant, and hopefully the tools will still be helpful, though there may be different ways to approach being in the application process right now that doesn't take as long, and maybe is a little bit more, let's say, directly impactful to the application itself. We're really going to talk a lot about planning for the application phase. So if you do have a senior, I am happy to answer your questions, but just know that this information is tailored for a little bit younger. All right, let's get into it. I want to know who all of you are. So I've got some questions for you here. And these really come from uh, what I often see with families. When people call, they usually fall into one of these categories, sometimes multiple categories. So I want to hear from you. Are you worried that you've missed something? If you are, put an A in the chat if you're feeling behind. If you aren't sure what you should be doing or how to prioritize all the things that you feel like you should be doing, put a B. If you are just pushing your kids to do everything because you're not really sure what's really going to matter, give me a C. And if you're wondering, why does it have to be so hard? I don't remember it being this hard when I was going through it. Or maybe you did higher education outside of the country, or maybe you have a first generation college going student. Give me a D. And if it's multiple, like Carolina, you gave me 2, give me all the answers. This really helps me know how we're feeling, give me a sense of the energy in the room, so I can help you through what you're feeling. Okay, C. A lot of A's, a lot of B's. Okay. And there's an E in there. All right. This is helpful. And I do this partly to know who I'm talking to, but also to help you know you are not alone feeling this way, right? There's so many other parents besides just the, however many are in this Zoom room right now, feeling exactly this way and asking themselves, what should we be doing? How is this affecting my child's self-conception? How is it affecting my relationship with my child? How am I all of a sudden a college counselor? Don't they have people for this in high school? Why am I doing this? There are all of these questions that are swirling, and you're not alone because this system is really not set up to serve you. It is set up to serve the colleges and their goals. And as much as people go into higher education because they care about educating the next generation, widening access to higher education, and all of these things, they have their priorities. And their priorities are usually to their institution and their institutional goals, not to your precious child, unfortunately. And that means that the hoops that you and your child will have to jump through are challenging. They're hoops. And it can feel like, we're running around in circles. This may not really compute why they want to know this thing or why is this important to them. But that's how this system has developed. So I'm going to take you through what actually goes into the process so that you can hopefully come away with an understanding of, what should I be really prioritizing? What do we need to be doing? And like I said, when, because I think that's also very important. Okay. So this is just a very high level overview of what goes into a college application. Some of these things are things that you won't touch until senior year of high school. Some of these things are things you won't even touch at all, like the recommendation forms, besides your child having to ask for them, right? You won't see them. And some of these things are things that you should be thinking about from the first day of high school. Some of these things are also things that are completely out of your control, right? They're just the facts of your family, right? So let's go through them and we'll talk a little bit about each of them. I do one of these sort of educational sessions every month, and I'm always talking about one of these things. So if you have really deep questions about some specific aspect, I encourage you to go to our events page. You can get recordings of past sessions and see the upcoming ones as well. And if there's a question you have that we haven't answered, just email me and I'll get you that answer. So the first part of the college application process is really determining where you're going to apply, and that is building your college list. That is something that I encourage you to spend a lot of time on. There's a reason I put it as the first step in the process. Getting that college list right not only will help you organize everything else that you need to do and come out with a clear sense of priorities for those things. But it will also increase your chances of your child getting into the right college for them. And building a college list is not just looking at the rankings for whatever you think they might major in and taking the top 15. That's actually the opposite of what you want to do. Like I said, have other sessions on this where I've spent a lot more time on this, but in the very briefest of descriptions, I will say it starts with understanding your students' wants and needs from their college experience, and then matching the colleges to those wants and needs, not starting with the college, right? Starting with the student. So building the college list takes time. Most of my students spend 6 months or more doing college research, talking to students, going to information sessions, going on some tours, watching YouTube videos, and really getting into the weeds of what it would be like to be a student at that college, and does it meet my wants and needs? So that's something I encourage you to spend a lot of time on, and do it first, right? You can starting to dream about a college list early in high school, and that won't hurt you. The other pieces of the application are things that, like I said, you're really going to work on in senior year, but you may have to do some groundwork to get them to the place you want them to be at, let's say. The application form is pretty straightforward. You're going to answer questions about your family demographics, where parents have been educated and what they do for a living, where you live, if there are siblings. You're going to talk about the education. What high school or high schools has your student gone to? Who is the counselor at that high school, and some other basic information about the kind of curriculum, the kind of classes students have taken. You may, if you are applying for financial aid, have to fill out some financial aid forms. And unfortunately, this last year, they've gotten not complicated, but the situation is complex. The portal that you use to fill the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, has undergone some revamps that have not launched very smoothly. So we expect there to be hiccups this coming year as well. So prepare ahead for that. You know, get your ducks in a row there. You've got to collect some financial information to understand what your options are. And then you have the activities list, or work experience counts as an extracurricular activity. On the common application, which is the main application form that most students will be using, they have space for 10 activities. This is over the course of high school. Your student may have more than 10, may have less than 10. They're just spaces for 10. And there's a certain way that you need to present the information about those activities, and you'll see this on the tracker. This is one of those things that you want to be aware of from the beginning of high school. You want students really understanding what their interests are, what kind of people they want to be around through exploring extracurriculars. And eventually taking on more and more responsibility as they, move through high school into the later years. Not everybody can be the president of every club, but you can still spearhead a particular project or take responsibility for some section of the group. And colleges really love to see that. Volunteer work, community service falls under this, as does any household responsibility. So if your kid is helping taking care of a younger sibling or a sick relative, those are things that would count here too. They just want to understand what students are doing outside of the school day, as a way to garner what are their interests and priorities in life outside of academics. Essays are something that you hear a lot about when it comes to the college application, but obviously the college application is so much more than just essays. We have 2 types of essays that may be required. The items with an asterisk here are things that are not always required by every college. So the personal essay is the big college essay that everyone is probably familiar with. It's really about an instance of personal growth, a moment when a student came to a better understanding of themselves or their place in the world, something like that. And it's about 650 words. The prompts haven't changed much over the last 5-6 years, but there is also a prompt that is write about anything you want. So really any story a student wants to tell will be applicable here, but it's not an academic essay. It is an essay about who they are as a person, what their values are, and how they see themselves in community. Those are really important things to cover. if you're curious about the essays, I did a really great session in June with a bunch of my essay specialists, and that was a lot of fun. So you should take a listen to that recording. The supplemental essays are optional essays that some colleges require, not all, and they're usually shorter and they're more specific to the school. So the personal essay is more specific to the student, and every college they apply to through the common application would get the same personal essay. But the supplemental essays are where you're answering questions like, why do you want to go to Boston University? Or how are you going to contribute to the community at the University of Pennsylvania? So, there's something about the student, but then it's aligning it with something about the school. And they're really only like 10 prompts under the sun. They're worded in all different ways, but they do tend to overlap. So you can reuse portions of those essays for, multiple schools that ask the same question, but you do really need to tailor them to each school. And most schools that have a supplemental essay have like 1 to 3 essays. And it's safe to say the more selective the school is, the more demanding these supplemental essays will be. So sometimes there are 8 essays that students have to write, or 6 essays and 3 short answers. And it can be a lot. It really does add up. So I want you to know that as, before you enter the process, the more schools you add, the more essays your student will likely have to write. So just keep that in mind. You've got to plan ahead and you've got to start early enough that they can finish all of these things. And then we have recommendations. This actually should have an asterisk as well. A lot of colleges are moving away from requiring recommendations. There's a lot of inequity baked into the process of getting recommendations from teachers. A lot of teachers have refused to write recommendations. I had a student at a high school last year. The teachers went on strike, but on strike from writing recommendations. And that's how they got their demands met by the school board. But most colleges are looking for 2 teacher recommendations that can speak to who the student is in a classroom, how they treat other students, how intellectually curious they are, how disciplined their academic habits are, and that kind of information. So it will be important for your student to build relationships with teachers. Usually we ask for recommendations from 11th grade teachers. So that's the year really to focus on those relationships and try to figure out who can write a recommendation that's not necessarily from the class that you got the best grade in, but the teacher who knows the student the best. That's going to be the best recommendation. Test scores, this should have like a million asterisks on it. About 80% of colleges in the US today are test optional, which means you can apply with or without a test score. It's your choice. There are some rough guidelines for when you should submit and when you shouldn't submit. It's quite nuanced. I did a session on testing, I think it was last month. I'll do another later in the winter, but you can find recordings and stay tuned for more information on that because it deserves like several hours of conversation to figure out what you should do around testing. But that is also something that you're going to need to prepare ahead of time. Most students take a test somewhere between the end of sophomore year and the end of junior year if they're going to submit a test with their college application. So again, you want to start early enough that you have time to, number 1, figure out your strategy. Number 2, study and take a test. Most students do take it twice, so that you have time to get the test score you want in order to submit it with your college applications the next year. The transcripts will come from your school, but I thought it was worth mentioning here because obviously grades are the most important factor in college applications. And this is where colleges learn about a student's grades. They learn a couple of things from looking at a transcript. They're looking at the grades, obviously. They're also looking at what courses did the student choose to take, partly to gauge rigor. How hard are the courses? How challenging are the courses? How advanced are the courses that the student has been able to take? And what interests can we garner from the courses that the student chose, right? If they had a choice of electives for an English class and they chose one that focused on film, that says something about the student's interests and they want to learn as much as they can about the student. So they're looking at the actual course titles to see if there's anything they can learn about your student there as well. And then optional, again, is an interview. So some schools don't do interviews at all. Some schools have moved to asking students to submit a 90-second video or a 2-minute video about themselves instead of an interview. And then there are many that still do interviews. Some are with admissions officers or current students or alums. And you'll have to look at your college list to see what they require, if you'll be invited to an interview, or if you can schedule one on your own just off their website. It's different for every school. So it took me, 5 minutes to go through all of this. Each of one of these could have its own deep dive, but all told, this is what goes into the college application. And like I said, there's some of these things you want to be aware of early on. Some of them you're not going to deal with until senior year. But when we look at this, most of the time we think, okay, if this is what they're collecting from students, they must want students who have the best demographics, whatever that might mean, the best education, the best activities, the best essays, the best recommendation, the best test scores, the best transcript, the best interview. And that can be a very misleading premise to proceed from, because colleges are selective, not competitive, right? It's not just maximize every item that is being submitted. If you think about it, every year we hear some kid with a perfect SAT and like 15 APs and started his own nonprofit and then his own business that made, $50,000 a month, something ridiculous, very impressive for a high school student. We hear about that kid and they didn't get in. And then we're confused. And we say, oh my gosh, if this kid couldn't get into Stanford, what more could they ask of students? What more could that student do? What more could any student do to qualify, to get the attention of the college admissions officer, to be enough that they're satisfied, right? But that is imagining that this process is competitive, right? These selective colleges, the ones with, I consider really anything under a 25% acceptance rate selective. But when we're talking about the most selective, we've got schools that have 3 and 4% acceptance rates. These colleges can fill their classes many times over with these amazing students, top scores, huge academic achievements, student body presidents, president of, this and that, editor of the newspaper, recognized by the Senate, who knows, right? They can fill their classes several times over. They're getting thousands more applications than they have spots in their class. So last year, I looked at these numbers recently. Harvard got something like 56,000 applications, and they only have 1,600 spots, right? That's why they're so selective. But how many of those 56,000 applications had similar academic credentials? I would guess more than half, maybe more, right? These are the most competitive students who are applying to the most selective colleges. So the way I want you to shift your understanding about this is to shift towards selectivity, right? It's not that the student hadn't done enough or their application wasn't enough. It's that it wasn't a match. And colleges are looking for a match. And you'll hear other people talk about the word fit. That's what we're talking about, right? And there are lots of different ways to think about fit. There's academic fit. Can they handle the rigor of our coursework and the expectations, the academic expectations we have of them? There's social fit, cultural fit. There's geographic fit, right? Colleges want a variety of geographies represented in their incoming classes. And they don't want everybody from one single state or one area of the country. They like to say, we have somebody from all 50 states and we have, 100 countries represented. They like that, right? And so there are lots of different ways to slice and dice this aspect of fit, right? But the academic achievements are kind of just table stakes. And then it's these other things that are not on this list that students get selected for, right? And what I'm going to show you next is my framework. This is what we use at Signet. This is how we think about every student's candidacy. And I mentioned academics are just table stakes, right? If you want to go to a selective college, you have to have strong academics. But the things that allow a student to differentiate themselves, get selected for admission, are these other aspects of the pyramid that are above and beyond academics. They're the shared values that a student might have with a school. There's a remarkable factor, and I'll talk about each of these a little bit more in a second. Something remarkable about that student that really fits the need that the college has identified. And excuse me, when a student has all of these things, that's when they're most likely to be selected for a very selective college, right? And even for the less selective colleges, they are also thinking about these things, but they may have more bandwidth, more room, more leeway to accept more and more students, right? Bigger student body, different priorities, different mandate, different mission, right? Particularly public colleges versus private colleges. We think about the in-state acceptance rate versus the out-of-state acceptance rate. And it's not that they're like strict, oh, this kid didn't get a 1300 on his SAT, so he can't get in. Or if you break that 1300, then you're automatically in. There are some places with more automatic admissions like that, but vast majority of schools are still using a very holistic way of evaluating applications. And they're using this sort of framework, might be under different language. It may not look like a pyramid, but this is the sort of framework they're using for evaluating their students. They're thinking about their academics. They're thinking about the cultural, social fit with the values. And they're thinking about how does this student actually meet an institutional priority that we have. Let me take a break and have some water and clear this frog in my throat while I am breaking. Please put some questions in the chat. I see Sanford, you put one in here. Let me take a drink and I'll get to your question. If anybody else has any, please put them in there. Excuse me. Oh, Sanford, that is a great question. I will get to this. Sanford asks, I mentioned factors that fit the needs that the colleges have identified. How do we research and identify those needs for the schools that you're targeting? That's exactly what you want to do. And there are a number of ways to do that. So let me go through the pyramid and I'll come back to that. So academics are the broad foundation of this pyramid. They are repeatedly for many, many years and across many different types of surveys, the most important factor to all kinds of colleges, public, private, not selective, selective, small, large. Academics are the thing that they're looking at first and foremost. And they measure academic ability through a number of ways. Grades, the rigor of the transcript, as I mentioned. They are also looking at test scores. If they're optional and your student has submitted one, they'll look at that test score. If they're required, there are more and more colleges bringing back the test. It's still not a majority, but there are many selective colleges starting to bring it back. Test score helps them understand something about a student's ability to handle the academic rigor at their college and predict their academic success at their college. And I also like to include executive function skills under academics. These are the, let's say, meta skills that help a student get things done, stay organized, stay on track. So time management, impulse control, task initiation, prioritization, planning, all of those sorts of skills that are not really related to, do you understand algebra, but more like, can you get yourself organized so that you can study and turn in your homework on time and get to class when you need to be there? Self-advocacy is a big one. And they measure that through largely the teacher recommendation. The teachers have an ability to comment on those sort of habits, and the way the student interacts with course material. And that's a really important part, especially if there isn't a test score. That becomes a much more important part of the college application. So, we have a lot of students these days, and at Signet, I would say this is maybe 60-70% of the students we work with. Brilliant students, like really some of the smartest students I've ever met, who struggle with executive functions. And it's even more common after COVID. A lot of students just lost the opportunity to practice and build some of these skills at just a really crucial age. And so doing what you can to strengthen those early in high school is really important. But I do have to have this conversation with students that your teachers are going to comment on if your assignments are always late, or if you can't seem to keep yourself organized. That may show up in your recommendation. So those habits are really important to solidify and practice in high school. And then we move on to values. And I call them values. Some people might call it character. There are more surveys now of the college admissions landscape that show that colleges care about positive character attributes in their applicants. And these would be generally pro-social attributes, people who like building community, who are caring, kind, helpful, engaged, that sort of thing. And they also want to see that the student has a sense of their own values, that they have a sense of integrity of who they are, and how they want to show up in their school community, in their wider community, because that gives a college something to imagine how the student's going to be on their campus by. And they're measuring this largely, I would say, by what students put in their essays, what they write about, and how they speak about themselves, and how they relate to others. The teacher recommendations also come into play here, and then what the student chooses to do outside of school. Their extracurriculars really does say a lot about their values, right? We live in a world where everybody is overscheduled. So if a student has made time for something on a regular basis every week, it must be pretty important to them. And so, if that is an academic interest, if it is a creative interest, if it's a religious community, if it's community service, it's saying something about the student, that this thing is worth me spending my limited time on. And this is the kind of person I am. This is the kind of priority I have. And colleges increasingly are sharing what their values are. You can always Google the college's mission statement or a statement of values to see what they say their values are. And then you can kind of evaluate, does that match the student? And I always caution people, don't just try to turn yourself into what you think, Northwestern University wants. Instead, really spend the time reflecting and learning who you are, thinking about who you admire, and then take that list of values and select among the colleges. It gives you the control back in this process. And then finally, we get to the remarkable factor. And we can define this in a lot of different ways. I usually tell parents, your kid is already remarkable in a way that you just don't realize is remarkable. And that's not to say, parents, you don't love your kids. You all do. I know you all think your kids are very special. But even the students themselves don't know what's special about them. They're just them. They're just being themselves. And they think, oh, that's nothing big. And maybe they compare themselves to somebody else. They heard some story of, somebody who climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, or, built 15 schools in some place in South America. And they think that is the definition of success, when they themselves are doing something amazing. It might not even be something they do, just a way of being that really lights up all the people that are around them, is a special talent of theirs. It's a unique zone of genius that they are just starting to tap into as a young person. And working with them to reflect, understand themselves, really love themselves, and understand their strengths can help you articulate what this remarkable factor is. And it's going to be unique to your student. Especially in combination with their values and their academics and their interests, it's going to make them a very unique candidate, right? So instead of trying to say, all right, I want to apply to, these 8 Ivies, and I have to figure out how to stand out in the most competitive pool in the world, think about, how can I help my student be the best version of themselves, their authentic selves. You know, you're going to push them a little bit because they're teenagers, but without having them do something that's really outside of their values or outside of their comfort zone too far, to help them really tap into, you know, the version of themselves that they are right now, because it is going to change, and helping them do those things and show up that way to the greatest extent possible. And Sanford, to your question about how can we understand where that remarkable factor aligns, or how this match pyramid aligns with what a college is looking for, colleges are signaling this in a lot of different ways, right? They will give you the data on what's the average GPA and the average test score, what kind of geographic representation do we have from, you know, last year's incoming class, and they track that data every year. They have to report it to the government. You can look at the common data set for each school to see the detailed analysis of all of those things. But most schools on their admissions website will give you what they call their freshman class profile, and it kind of gives you those stats. So, you know, you want to make sure you're in line with those numbers, essentially. And then the values and the mission statement that I was telling you about, that's another way that they're telling you, this is what we want. Another way that they're telling you this is through the marketing that they put out. So I spend a lot of time with my students as we're researching schools, looking at the website or looking at PDFs or print materials to say, now, who are they trying to attract by showing this scene from a football game, or these 3 students doing research in lab coats? Who are they trying to attract? What message are they trying to send you, right? Now, that may or may not be an accurate reflection of the reality right now at that school, but it is the message that they're trying to send you. Those are the people they're trying to attract. And if that is not your student, then that school may not be a great match for them, right? So that's another way. And then a final way that I'll share here is I encourage you to look at the news feed for each college. On their website, it's like news and events, and there's just a news feed there. They're going to talk about breaking ground on this new building, hiring this new professor, investing in this department, winning a grant in this field of study. That tells you where they're putting their resources, where they want to attract students. They only put their resources somewhere where they can attract students, right? So pay attention to that for the schools that you're looking at, and you'll see on my college organizer, there's a place for all of this information. Pay attention to that and see how it resonates with your student, because if they're investing in things that your student is already interested in, that is a great sign that your student meets an institutional priority of theirs. All right. Going to keep going here. Oh, actually, before I keep going, this is why I build slides, so I don't forget to tell you things. If you want to know really like the data behind this, where this match pyramid came from, the kinds of students it's been able to help, and then what you can do with it to help navigate, you know, the 4 years of high school or however many years of high school your kid has next, or left, I built a course, you know, convenient, asynchronous, much lower price than our normal services. You can scan that QR code and get access to it today. It's called What Really Matters in College Admissions. And that is the question that I get from most people. I was like, how do we know what really matters? Well, I'll take you through all of the data, all of the forms, and dig deeper into this match pyramid. All right, I will send that out with the recording. So if you don't get a chance to scan it right now, we can do it. You can do it later. So it can be overwhelming to think about all of the things that you have to do and when you have to do them, especially when you're dealing with a teenager who may not want to listen to you. So I encourage you to take it in phases and give your student a phase or maybe part of a phase to focus on at a time. I like to think about it in these sort of 3 phases. The first is candidacy development, which I usually encourage in 9th and 10th grade. Planning and organization is going to be most of 11th grade, really junior years when you're actually getting the ducks in a row. And then application writing would be summer after junior year into senior fall, where you're actually submitting all of these things. And these are not like hard and fast timelines. You could start one a little earlier. not later, I don't think. But you could start earlier. I don't think you should do them all at once because they are sequential. They build upon each other. The work that you do in candidacy development will help you understand what kinds of colleges are a fit, what kind of application strategy or narrative strategy you want to pursue based on, your students' interests and values and the things that they want out of their college experience, right? You can't do that work without first doing the inner work and the inner reflection. And then you can't do the application writing of all these very personal essays without the student thinking about how have they grown and what kind of person do they want to be, right? So it all really rests upon candidacy development. So 9th and 10th grade are very important years for the college process, but not in the way that the later years are also very important. So let me take you through what each of these things mean. In my college organizer, you will get a whole timeline with each of these elements. We talked about values. It can be a cringy and earnest conversation with a teenager to talk about what their values are. But parents, you can kind of sneak it into your conversations when you hear them, doing something that is really aligned with some value, right? If they value community, and that they value, the community they found in maybe their dance school or this robotics club or whatever it is, and then they do something to bring somebody into that community, you can use that language and say, wow, I'm really impressed how you brought this person into your community. I know how much you care about community, and you're always opening the doors for other people to join and share that value with you. You don't have to say, I think one of your values is community. You can kind of shout it out, use that language as you're talking to them about their, everyday existence. But also starting to explicitly reflect on those values and helping them understand how them having a great understanding of themselves is not only going to help them in the college process, but just in life and in relationships. That can be an important part of raising a teenager. Reflecting on learning preferences, they're going to tell you they hate this teacher, they love that teacher. Ask them why, even if it's I hate that teacher, right? Understand what they don't like about how that teacher teaches or treats them or the atmosphere that they've set up. Really try to get clear on that, because those are things you're going to want to keep an eye on. If they don't like, impersonal lectures, maybe they don't want to go to a giant school where most classes are going to be impersonal lectures, right? And that's how you can translate what's going on in high school to the broader college context. I want them exploring their interests. They don't always have to be career interests. They could be hobbies. They could be, passions of theirs that don't seem like they're going to go anywhere. Sometimes that's just the best thing when you have a student who is interested in a whole bunch of things because they're just truly interested in them. Colleges love that, but you can't force it. You really just have to encourage them to go further with whatever they're showing you they're interested in. And extracurriculars are a great place to try things on and see how they like them and pursue them further. If they do, then maybe there is a academic program that they can join over a summer, or an internship that they could get, or a research something or other, or a mentorship relationship with somebody else that who does that thing. But it all starts with just being open to exploring. 9th and 10th grade is also for shoring up academic skills. So note-taking, reading, all those executive function skills that I talked about, study skills, organization. They really want to get a handle on like high school life early in high school, because that's going to empower their grades, but it's also going to be really valuable skill building for the college process and eventually their college career. Building relationships is really important with other mentors, with coaches, with teachers, not just for the recommendations eventually, but to just practice articulating, what they care about and speaking to other adults. It's a great way for students to learn to mature. I like students to work on reflection on some regular basis. This is something that even us adults, we don't find time for. We're so busy, but the more we reflect and assess, our experiences, the more we can make informed decisions about, do I want to do more of this or less of that? Who am I? What are my values? How do I communicate that to people? And then I put goals in here too. It could be a college goal. I really want to go to this particular college. It could be a goal about life, the kind of job they want to have. Could be a goal about the kind of person they want to be. I think getting practice setting goals and moving towards them in some regular, methodical fashion is a really great skill to build early in high school. Now, the rest of this stuff is far more tactical. We'll go through it a little bit more quickly. But after sophomore year, we want to figure out what their testing strategy is. Are they testing? Which test are they taking? When are they going to take the test? Are they going to super score it? Is it going to be, digital? Is it going to be paper? Lots of questions around testing. I encourage you to start that after sophomore year, because then you'll have time to take whatever action you need to take to actually take the test and get the score you want. You do your college research, and that informs your final college list. Visits are not required, but if you can do them, they can be great. You can always visit colleges that are around you that don't require that much logistical planning, but you get a sense for what size college campus might feel like a fit, or what kind of campus is resonating with your student. And then you want to spend some time thinking about, what's our application strategy? Meaning, are we applying early? Are we doing early decision? Is this going to be regular decision? How do I want to balance the mix of reach, target, and safety colleges on my list? And then the narrative strategy. What are the stories that I absolutely have to tell these colleges that have ended up on my list, because I know they're not only authentic to me, but they are going to resonate with the college. And then after junior year, starting the summer after junior year, is when we start actually filling out these application forms and taking that narrative strategy and turning it into essays, finalizing the activity list, working on the positioning. For this particular school, you really want to emphasize this value of yours or that one, and then the final polish and proofreading. And you'll see this again in my college organizer. I apologize. I've taken way too long talking through all of these things. I'm going to move even faster so that we can get to questions. Another way to think about the phases here is this map that I really love. It kind of uses the metaphor of climbing a mountain to represent the college application strategy. I'm not going to read everything on here, but what I want to point out is that you don't start the climb at the beginning. You start the climb in the middle. All of this is preparing to start the climb, right? So, and this, if any one of you is a mountaineer, you know that the preparation is actually half the battle, maybe more than half the battle, right? And it's just like that in the college process. The more prepared you are in terms of having things organized, doing your research, knowing what you want, the easier this process is going to be. Now, I can't guarantee, you're going to get into all the most selective colleges, but I can say doing this work ahead of time is going to turn down the stress and help you have a better relationship with your child as you move through the college process, right? You're going to know what to do and when and how if you take the time to prepare ahead of time. All right. Here's where you can get my college organizer. My main tips are really stay focused on your priorities. You can't prioritize everything. Take it phase by phase. You have different priorities for different phases, and just stay focused on that thing. Don't get distracted by all the noise out there, because I know it's in the media, the rumors, it's in the air, right? The anxiety around college admissions. But if you can stay focused on your priorities, you will stay out of that whirlpool and be able to lead your student through this with some calm and some confidence. I encourage you to inform your student, but not overwhelm them. So let them know, okay, I understand what we have to do with this whole process. And I know what you need to be focused on right now. If you have questions about some of those other things, I can share it with you, but I don't want you to get overwhelmed. We're going to stay focused on this. And I encourage you to free up the space in your brain. As human beings, we use all sorts of technology, a to-do list, a tracker, other kinds of tools are your friends, right? This QR code will take you to my college organizer. There is a short video there showing you how to use it. There are free resources that are linked. It's got a checklist, a timeline for the whole process, a checklist for the application phase. It's got a template for your activities tracker, and it's got a college research template and a template for organizing the actual colleges on your final college list and any essays that are required for them. So you'll see it all there. It's all populated with sample information. You can make your own copy. You don't have to do anything besides scan the QR code. And I encourage you to share it with as many people who, that need it. I just want to be able to get some help out there, because I don't think parents get enough support around this. And then, another way to do this to free up space in your brain is to bring in an expert, right? This is the work that me and my team do day in and day out with hundreds of students. We've worked with over 10,000 students in our, just in the last 10 years. We've been in business for 18 years. So we've had great success, very happy clients, students who not only get into the colleges that they're looking at, but who get in ready for those opportunities, right? They are self-aware, they are tuned into what their own values and boundaries. They know how to talk about themselves, and they consistently impress college admissions officers. So bring in an expert if you are going to need that help, for all of the process or just a piece of the process. All right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we do it at Signet, and then I promise I will move us to questions. Most places that do college admissions only do college admissions. They don't do any of the other things. But I want you to remember the match pyramid and all the factors that go into a college application. It's not just writing the essay. It's not just building the college list. It's having a robust extracurricular profile. It's working on character development. It's aligning all of those things to your college list. It's having the test score, having the disciplined habits. So at Signet, we do SAT, ACT prep, academic coaching, and subject tutoring to help build this entire portfolio for a student. They may not need all of the services, all of the help, but we're always going to be advising you from a place of, here's your SAT score. I think if you focus on some performance aspects in this section, that will help you get the score you need to really be taken seriously at this particular college or that one. And you don't have to coordinate that message from, your test prep tutor to your college admissions consultant, or, have things get lost in the game of telephone. So everything here is very coordinated, and we're always taking a very holistic approach to advising our students. And I want you to remember, it's a portfolio, right? This thing that you're submitting has a lot of documentation and numbers, but it's representing a whole student. And so you really want to make sure that you are putting the right things in the portfolio and not just trying to cater to whoever it is that you're talking to, right? If any of you are artists, you've ever had to submit a portfolio of work or anything like that, you're not just saying, oh, I can do everything, right? You're saying, no, this is what I do really, really well, and this is why it's going to meet your need, right? And so if you do your research for the college, you'll know how to position your portfolio so that the right elements are resonating, right? And they can see what a wonderful match you are, what a wonderful addition your child would be to their college campus. Okay, now I'm happy to stay on longer because I know I took up all of our time with my rambling. If you have questions, you can email me, you can call the office, you can visit our website for free resources, for blog posts. If you scan this QR code, you will get onto a calendar for a free admissions consultation. We can help you get your ducks in a row. We can help you understand your situation and where we think you should focus a little bit more time. And if you are looking to bring in some support around any of those areas, we can recommend, what we think you should do. So I'm going to leave this up, but now I would love to open it for questions. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or come off of mute and ask me your question.
Hi, this is Chastity Cruz. I think I put this question in the chat earlier, but what percentage of Signet students get into Ivy League schools?
That's an interesting question, Chastity. I would really love to know why you want to know that answer.
Just wondering, just wondering. I mean, I know Even my daughter, right, she's setting her heights very high. She's been saying
Mhm.
for a year, I'm going to Harvard, and I think
Uh-huh.
obviously, you know, um, I want her to have very high goals.
Yeah.
I want her to also, broaden her, different options and choices as well. And, I just don't want it to be like kind of like a societal thing. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So just wondering,
Yeah. So we are a very data-driven company, and I do have that information. I'm happy to send you a list of our recent admissions, which do include all of the Ivies.
Mhm.
But I always hesitate to say, oh, this percent get into Ivies, because there are no guarantees,
Right,
right?
right.
And there are companies that are going to tell you, oh, we have a 70% admissions rate to, whatever university.
Mhm.
But what they're not telling you is that they had maybe 4 students apply. They were very selective about which students they decided to work with and
Right,
allowed them to apply to that school, and 3 of them got in.
right.
So that's their 75% admissions rate. So it's really not telling you anything that is valuable, right? So like I said, I'm happy to share with you our stats, our recent admissions. I have former admissions officers from various Ivy League schools that work for us. Like, my team is made up of former admissions officers from selective schools around the country. Um, but I hesitate to give you that number, because I think it can be taken so far out of context.
No, I completely understand. And just, going through this, session with you and understanding kind of some of the parameters of how students are selected for all schools, right? It
Yeah.
just is a completely different context. So no, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was a great question. Um, Courtney put a resource in the chat. Yes, I did see this. Build your own college rankings. I think it's a great tool. I think the New York Times has done some really interesting things around educating people what happens with the college process. And people are obsessed with rankings. It's just it's easier for our human brains to be like, okay, this is the best. So this is where I should apply. But what they're getting at with this tool is that the rankings are built on the parameters of, a particular company that may not be the parameters of you or your child. And so if you get to set your parameters, you can decide what's best for you. So I do really like this tool. Thank you for sharing it with the group. Um, Holly asks, you have specific materials, services, or resources targeting college students who have learning learning differences or IEPs, both for the application process and building a school list. This is a great question. Like I said, I think something like 60 or 70% of our students have some sort of learning difference, executive function challenge, attentional challenge, or even anxiety or depression. And it is really very heartbreaking to me that that's such a large percentage of the students that we work with. But I think we attract a lot of those students because we do a lot of academic coaching, which is 100% in support of students with learning disabilities and executive function challenges. So yeah, we work with a lot of students going through the college process who have trouble getting started, getting the words on the page, being disciplined about getting the research done, right? One of the things that I always want to do as a busy mom myself is I want to take stuff off of your plate, right? And I want to empower your kid to get this done, help them learn some skills to manage things like this on their own, and not have mom be the homework police, the nag, all of the things that you're probably getting called. So yeah, we have a lot of experience working with students who have that kind of trouble getting started, but also a lot of experience with schools that have support programs just for those sorts of students. Oh, Courtney, you're having trouble with the QR code. I'm very sorry about that. I'm gonna have to stop my share. And I will get the right link. Sorry about that in the chat. What other questions do we have? There's the link. So that link is for my colleague Emmeline, who is a college admissions expert herself. She helps lots of kids with their college essays. She went to Harvard as an undergrad. She has a master's degree from Harvard Grad School of Education. And she's worked in the world of learning differences and neuropsych evaluations for a long time, helped a number of people write their books on the subject. She's helping me write my book. So she's really a wonderful expert and a resource that I hope you take advantage of. Other questions? Okay. Well, I counted to 7. That is what I was always told, is to wait 7 seconds for people to get their questions out. If you have more questions that for whatever reason you just didn't feel comfortable asking on the call, feel free to email me. We'll set up a time to talk. Or you can, email me the question. I'll do my best to answer it right there. I do hope that, I hope the other QR codes work. If you need the college organizer, I'm going to drop that in the chat too. And the course, sorry, now I'm like paranoid that the QR codes didn't work. This is the course page as well. Okay, codes all worked for you. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. And I hope I'll see you at the next one of these. Take care.